Hey, I've been diving into Presbyterianism lately, and it's really fascinating.
hmm
Have you ever thought about what sets it apart from other branches of Christianity?
Actually, I haven't given it much thought.
Oh,
What's so
really?
distinctive about it?
Well, it all traces back to the 16th century Protestant Reformation,
Right.
with John Calvin and his emphasis on the sovereignty of God and the authority of Scripture.
So it's rooted in Calvinism?
Exactly. Calvin's teachings were a huge influence.
Yeah.
And then there's John Knox, who studied under Calvin in Geneva. He took those ideas back to Scotland and established the Presbyterian Church there.
Ah, I see. But what's unique about their governance?
Well, it's governed by elders or
Right.
presbyters. It's a system where leadership is shared among elected elders from the congregation, which is quite democratic if you think about it.
That's interesting. So it's not a hierarchical structure like some other denominations?
Exactly, it's more representative. The idea is to balance authority and accountability within the church community. It
hmm
fosters a sense of shared responsibility.
I like that concept. So what
Me
are their
too.
core beliefs?
Well, they emphasize the sovereignty of God, meaning God is the supreme authority over all
Yeah,
creation. They also hold the authority of Scripture as paramount. The Bible is the ultimate guide for faith and practice.
makes sense. And what about salvation?
Salvation is viewed as a gift from God, granted through faith in Jesus Christ, not by human merit. It's all
Right.
about God's grace.
So do they believe in predestination?
Yes, they do. Reflecting Calvinist influence, they believe God has foreordained all events, including who will be
Hmm.
saved. It's intended to underscore God's grace and omnipotence.
That's a bit controversial, isn't it? I mean, doesn't that
Yeah,
challenge
uh,
the concept of free will?
it is a complex topic, but the idea is that even though God has a divine plan, humans still make real choices.
I
It's
see.
one of those theological paradoxes.
Interesting. So, how does this belief system influence their worship practices?
Their worship is characterized by simplicity and reverence.
hmm
They focus on the preaching of the word, prayer, and the sacraments.
Sacraments like baptism and communion?
Exactly. They observe two sacraments instituted by Christ, baptism and the
Right.
Lord's Supper. They view them as means of grace and expressions of faith.
And the congregation participates actively?
Absolutely. Communal participation is
Yeah,
encouraged. Members are involved in prayers, hymns, and responses, reflecting the priesthood of all believers.
that sounds very inclusive.
It is. They believe everyone has a role to play in the church community.
Right.
It's part of their distinctive governance system, too.
Speaking of governance, can you elaborate more on that?
Sure, their system, called Presbyterian polity, is leadership by a body of elders elected by the
hmm
congregation. This representative form of church government seeks to balance authority and accountability.
That's quite democratic for a church structure.
Exactly, it fosters shared responsibility within the church community.
Yeah.
Each congregation is part of a larger council all the way up to national assemblies.
So, what sets Presbyterianism apart from other denominations?
Well, apart from their governance, they have a strong emphasis on education and social justice.
Right.
Historically, they've promoted literacy and established schools and universities.
How does that tie into their beliefs?
They believe in applying faith principles to all areas of life.
hmm
Engaging with the world through education and reform is a way to live out their faith.
That's admirable. And social justice?
Yes, they've been active in advocating for societal reforms. It's
Right.
part of their commitment to address societal issues and promote justice.
But do you think focusing on predestination might lessen the emphasis on personal responsibility?
That's a thoughtful question. Some might argue that, but Presbyterians believe understanding God's sovereignty actually inspires individuals to live
I
responsibly.
see.
They feel that knowing God is in control gives purpose to their actions.
That makes sense. So, overall, what's your take on Presbyterianism?
I think it offers a rich blend of theological depth, structured governance, and active engagement in societal issues.
Yeah,
Their focus on the sovereignty of God, the authority of Scripture, and communal leadership is quite compelling.
it does seem to provide a strong sense of community and purpose.
Exactly, and in today's world, that's something many people are searching for. It's
Definitely.
interesting to see how these traditions continue to shape communities.
Well, thanks for sharing all this. I feel like I've learned a lot about Presbyterianism.
I'm glad. It's
Yeah,
always fascinating to delve into different Christian traditions and see how they contribute to the broader tapestry of faith.
absolutely. Maybe next time we can explore another denomination.
That sounds great. There's so much to
hmm
learn.